Hello! Today's recipe is for ginger snaps, which is one of my favorite cookies to make around the holidays. So for this recipe, we're going to start out by melting 3/4 of a cup of butter. When you melt butter for cookies, it makes the cookies thinner, but it also allows the center to be soft and chewy while the edges are still crisp. Then we're going to add 1 cup of granulated white sugar into a medium-sized bowl. And we are going to mix in the melted butter once it is cooled just a little bit so it doesn't cook the sugar when you add it in. Now, because the butter is melted, you aren't able to get the same amount of air whipped into the butter and sugar as you would if you were using room temperature butter. So you want to be sure to whip it well because the melted butter also tends to separate from the sugar. So by mixing it together well, it helps it to homogenize. Then we're going to put in 1 egg, and then we're going to add in 1/4 cup of molasses. Now, molasses is a byproduct of the sugar making process. It's the syrup that's left behind after you boil the sugar cane to make it form the sugar crystals. It's part of the signature taste of these cookies, but on its own, it has a little bit of a bitter taste compared to a regular sugar product. And it's also what you add into white sugar to make it into brown sugar. Now we're going to measure out 2 cups of flour, as well as adding in our leavener and spices, starting with 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, and 1 teaspoon of ginger. Now, cinnamon, cloves, and ginger all originate from India. They were all brought to Europe and the Mediterranean by the spice trade, which is how the people in Asia and Africa all brought spices to Europe. And it was also even used as a form of currency in antiquity. But gingerbread actually does not originate from India. It was first made in 2400 BCE Greece and later taken by the Romans and adapted into what we know it to be today as they added in a leavening agent. So you just want to mix in your flour, and then we're going to cover it with some cling wrap, and we're going to pop this into the fridge for at least an hour to make sure that when you bake them, they don't go all over the place. You want to make sure that the butter solidifies so that the cookies will not spread too far out. Now we are ready to start rolling out our cookies, and we are actually going to roll these into some turbinado sugar. By encrusting these cookies with sugar, the baking process caramelizes the sugar and makes a crust around the cookie, adding an extra snap and crunch when you bite in. And you want to put down either parchment paper or a silicone mat, or you could just butter the tray just to make sure there's no sticking. Now we are going to use a tablespoon ice cream scoop, and I start by rolling the ball in my hands, rolling it into the sugar, and rolling it in my hands again to make sure that the sugar is completely pressed into the cookies. And then I just push them down a little bit on the cookie tray to make sure that they don't roll all over the place when we put them into the oven. And then we're going to bake them at 375 degrees for about 8 to 10 minutes, flipping the tray halfway through. And this is another cookie recipe that I like to freeze the dough so that I can make some more later. I typically do this just because making a bunch of Christmas cookies all at the same time, it's time consuming, and this way you don't feel like you're using as much butter as you are. So I just scoop them all out and put them on a tray, and I would recommend not to roll them in the sugar before you freeze them because it will make it a little soggy. And there they are out of the oven. You want them to be just a little bit crisp around the edges, but still soft in the middle. And that is my ginger snap recipe. Thank you for watching.